11. Horrifying beauty secrets of medieval royal women that destroyed their faces. A 16th century skeleton was unearthed in France in 2009. What made the scientific community pause was not its age, but the fact that the gold accumulated inside it was 500 times higher than normal levels. Its owner was once considered the most beautiful woman in France. At the age of 60, she maintained flawless skin by drinking liquid gold. But she was no exception. In many European courts, beauty did not stop at makeup. They forced it straight into their eyes, onto their skin, and deep inside their bodies. Why did those standing at the pinnacle of power agree to turn their bodies into testing grounds for substances that could utterly destroy them? And if that wasn't disturbing enough, see, this is merely the beginning of 11 beauty rituals that actually existed in European history. Number 11. White lead makeup. In many parts of 16th century Europe, a pale face was seen as the ultimate sign of status and nobility. The whiter the skin, the more it proved the person did not perform outdoor labor and had little exposure to the sun. Thus, a chalk-white complexion became the standard for the upper class. To achieve this exact shade, many noblewomen used a cosmetic called rouge, also known as Venetian white lead. This was no ordinary makeup powder. It was created by soaking lead in highly concentrated vinegar, triggering a chemical reaction that formed lead carbonate. The resulting powder was finely ground and mixed with water or egg whites to form a thick paste. When applied to the skin, it dried into a heavy white coating, completely concealing the natural skin tone beneath. In this context, Queen Elizabeth I of England serves as a prime example. After contracting smallpox in 1562, her face was left with deep pockmarks. As a monarch, her outward image carried immense political weight, so the thick white powder became her method of maintaining her public facade. Every day, a heavy layer of powder was painted over her face, neck, and chest. This layer was difficult to wash off completely and was often left on for days. Once dry, it formed a rigid crust that would easily crack with facial movements. Over time, prolonged exposure to lead took a severe toll on the skin. The skin became dry, dull, and lost its elasticity. Certain areas experienced distinct pigmentation changes. To hide these horrific alterations, fresh layers of powder were continuously applied, creating a relentless cycle of usage. The damage didn't stop at the skin. Chronic lead exposure deeply affected overall health. Historical records from the era frequently mention hair loss and severe physical deterioration among regular users. And if a white foundation was the way to construct an outward image, then painting the lips red took mineral usage a step further, applying it directly to the highly sensitive mucous membranes. Number 10. Cinnabar lipstick. A bold accent on the lips was once viewed as a sign of vitality, especially during aristocratic banquets. However, red pigments extracted from plants faded easily and lost their intensity after just a few hours. Therefore, many European apothecaries began using a more durable pigment, cinnabar. To the naked eye, the cinnabar looks like a block of brick red ore with a metallic sheen. But essentially, it is mercury sulfide, a heavy metal compound with extreme toxicity. The process of creating this lipstick began by crushing cinnabar ore in a stone mortar. The mineral was ground into a fine red powder, then mixed with animal fat or beeswax, and heated to form a thick paste that locked the metallic red hue inside. Once cooled, it became a solid stick of rouge, ready for use. When painted on the lips, the red color popped brilliantly under candlelight, becoming a focal point in the party atmosphere. But the lips are not inert skin. They are an area densely packed with capillaries, capable of rapidly absorbing substances upon direct contact. A portion of the mercury in Cinnabar could seep through the epidermis straight into the bloodstream. Simultaneously, through talking, eating, and drinking, small amounts were ingested into the digestive system. The human body possesses almost no effective mechanism to process mercury. Over time, it accumulated in internal organs, with the most devastating impact falling on the central nervous system. The changes were slow and imperceptible in the early stages. Perhaps a slight tremor in the hand when raising a goblet, or slightly imprecise facial muscle movements. As the concentration increased, the nervous system deteriorated visibly. Fragmented memory, slurred and uncontrolled speech, and delayed reflexes. Some cases recorded states of severe paranoia, or a distorted perception of reality. All of this unfolded behind a blood-red smile that remained practically unchanged. And using heavy metal compounds for lips was already a highly risky choice. But for harder-to-hide facial flaws, like inflammatory scars or skin lesions, the medical practitioners of the time went even further, turning to cruder and far less safe methods, utilizing materials gathered straight from their immediate surroundings. Number 9. Dog feces in aesthetic medicine. The medical systems of the Middle Ages and Renaissance operated on theories vastly different from modern science. When an upper-class woman suffered from severe dermatological issues, pustules, boils, or inflamed skin that lead powder could no longer hide, conventional skincare methods were often replaced by a prescription named album graecum. The name sounds highly academic, but it was actually the white, calcified residue formed from dried dog feces. On streets lacking proper sanitation systems, stray dogs left their waste everywhere. Under the beating sun and passing time, the organic matter decomposed, leaving behind a white, calcified crust on the surface. Apothecaries gathered this material, brought it back, and ground it into a fine powder. To reduce the sickening nature of it, the powder was mixed with honey, animal fat, or rose water. The final concoction became a pale, thick paste, ready to be applied to the skin. The patient had to sit perfectly still, as this paste was smeared directly onto their damaged skin, right over open sores, swelling, and inflammation. Imagine that sensation, a mixture originating from organic waste placed upon the most sensitive, compromised areas of the face. The paste dried slowly, clinging tightly to the skin's surface, creating a heavy, sticky feeling. At the time, physicians believed that the hygroscopic, moisture-absorbing nature of album graecum could draw out pus and soothe infections. In reality, introducing such foul impurities into open wounds frequently skyrocketed the risk of infection. Instead of improving, the skin often suffered deeper, more catastrophic damage, leaving permanent scars on the face. This was still just a surface-level intervention, but when beauty standards moved past the skin and focused on the gaze, other methods emerged, methods that directly assaulted the eyes. Number 8. Belladonna eye drops. In many parts of Renaissance Europe, particularly in Italy, eyes with widely dilated pupils were considered a mark of ultimate seduction. That gaze created a sense of mystery, depth, and unpredictability. To achieve this effect, some women turned to extracts from Atropa belladonna, a shrub bearing glossy black berries, commonly known in folklore as deadly nightshade. Picture an afternoon right before a grand banquet. A woman tilts her head back, holding her gaze steady. A servant uses a glass dropper or a feather dipped in the belladonna extract, letting drops fall directly onto her eyeballs. The moment the liquid touched the eyeball, a mild burning sensation ignited. The active compound, atropine, attacked the nervous system controlling the iris, paralyzing its natural ability to contract. The pupils dilated massively, creating a dark, bottomless, and intoxicating gaze. From the outside, her eyes looked striking under the candlelight. But her internal visual experience had been drastically altered. With pupils overly dilated, and the eyes lost their ability to regulate light. In the candlelit halls, light flooded straight into the retina, causing blinding glare and agonizing pain. Vision became blurred, and details lost their sharpness. The user could stand in the middle of a crowd, yet struggle to clearly recognize a face standing right in front of them. The impact wasn't limited to vision. A portion of the active compound could travel through the tear ducts and affect the rest of the body. Heart rates spiked, throats turned bone dry, and the body fell into an unnatural state of stimulation. In cases of abuse, the nervous system could be compromised. Disorientation, cognitive disruption, and fleeting states of hallucination occurred. The outward gaze retained its seductive allure, but the internal grip on reality was slipping. In exchange for the ideal gaze, dictated by the aesthetics of the time, users had to endure severe impairments to their actual sight. And yet, this was not the final limit. Once the gaze was altered, beauty standards plunged even deeper, aiming at the very foundation of life flowing beneath the face. Number 7. Blood-sucking leeches for skin. Whitening, draining the life force. In many regions of Europe, some noblewomen didn't just want to look white. They wanted a pallor that radiated from within. Skin was no longer a canvas for makeup. It had to be the genuine symptom of an anemic body. To actively induce this state of exhaustion, they turned to a creature of the swamps, the leech. Imagine a sealed room, dimly lit and cold. The barber surgeon enters, carrying a glass jar filled with murky water where slick, black leeches slowly undulate. Using wooden tongs, he methodically places the hungriest leeches onto the woman's body, usually behind the ears, along the jawline, or on the cheeks, where the skin is thin and veins are prominent. The moment they sense body heat, they latch on. Their three-part jaws, lined with hundreds of microscopic serrated teeth, slice through the epidermis. Simultaneously, they secrete a natural anticoagulant, locally numbing the skin and ensuring the blood flows freely without clotting. From a thin, flat creature, the leech gradually bloats. It becomes plump, slick, and turns dark crimson as it gorges on human blood. Throughout this entire process, the woman simply sits motionless. The continuous loss of blood causes her blood pressure to plummet and her heart rate to slow, and the rosy hue of her face drains away bit by bit, replaced by a cold, ghostly blue-white pallor. The body is plunged into a state of intentional physical collapse, and this was exactly the beauty standard they chased. But this procedure was rarely safe. Once full, the leech detached, leaving a Y-shaped bite that bled for hours. If violently ripped off early, the jaws could break and lodge under the skin, causing severe inflammation and pus pockets. Even worse, in many cases, leeches were reused across multiple patients, turning this procedure into an uncontrollable chain of cross-contamination. The consequences were chronic infections, deep facial scars, and dizzy spells or fainting that struck right in the middle of royal festivities. Letting a creature latch onto your skin and drink your blood was still a passive form of endurance. But as beauty standards escalated, the interventions didn't stop at the body's surface. It moved to a different level, where humans began to directly dismantle their own facial structure using cold metal and intentional destructive maneuvers. Number 6. Plucking the forehead for a high hairline. In many European courts from the 14th to the 15th century, facial aesthetics didn't stop at pale skin. A high, broad forehead with a hairline pushed far back was considered a highly desirable trait in aristocratic portraits. Hair growing low on the forehead was deemed incompatible with the ideal facial proportions of the time. Therefore, some noblewomen actively altered their hairlines to match this desired image. In reality, this process was usually executed by systematically removing hair from the frontal region. Thus they sat before metal mirrors while servants used metal tweezers to pluck the hair, strand by agonizing strand, along the front hairline. Some records and illustrations also suggest the use of sticky pastes applied to the hair and violently ripped off, thinning the hairline over time. Repeated trauma to the same area of skin left the scalp severely irritated. The hairline became red, highly sensitive, and sometimes developed folliculitis, if not properly cared for. Given the limited hygiene of the era, minor wounds could linger and cause permanent alterations to the hairline. After a certain period, the forehead genuinely widened because the hair simply stopped growing back in the repeatedly traumatized zones. These modifications could be partially hidden beneath elaborate hats or headdresses, which were popular fashion staples for noblewomen of the time. Alongside these interventions on hair and skin, other aesthetic standards targeted the senses directly, particularly the mouth. Number 5. Urine mouthwash. To perfect a truly aristocratic appearance, a bright white smile was practically mandatory. But in an era where dentistry was incredibly primitive, maintaining clean teeth was a highly uncontrollable issue. From the Middle Ages stretching all the way into the 18th century, in many parts of Europe, human urine was stored and used as an oral hygiene solution. The reasoning was not entirely random. As it decomposes, urine produces ammonia, a compound with powerful cleansing properties. Based on this observation, many physicians of the era believed this solution could obliterate bacteria in the oral cavity and reduce staining on the teeth. Picture a morning in the quiet luxury of an aristocratic bedroom. Instead of clean water or herbal extracts, the woman picks up a cup containing a dark yellow liquid that has been left to sit overnight. The distinct pungent odor wafts out the second the lid is lifted. The liquid is taken into the mouth. The sharp, burning sting of ammonia instantly spreads across the oral cavity, triggering a massive salivary reflex. The user had to hold and vigorously swish the liquid through every gap in their teeth, keeping the fluid moving for a set amount of time, all while the horrific taste clung stubbornly to the back of their throat. This ritual was believed to yield a gleaming set of teeth and fit for an appearance at evening banquets, but in reality, their breath often carried a lingering aftertaste of ammonia, making the concealment of it another necessary daily habit, usually achieved by chewing strong-smelling herbs like mint or cloves. If introducing bodily excretions into the mouth was a test of taste endurance, in other areas, beauty standards took a different route, intervening directly on the skin's surface with animal-derived substances to eradicate natural facial marks. Number 4. Bull and rabbit blood to erase freckles. A crimson, metallic-smelling mask. In 14th century England, freckles and natural pigmentation spots were not seen as personal quirks, but as glaring flaws that shattered the perfect skin standard of the aristocracy. In contemporary beauty manuals, sakati, a treatment was recorded that sounded purely natural and biological, but the actual experience strayed far beyond the limits of acceptability. Imagine a foggy morning rolling past the window. Instead of jars of scented wax or herbs, a servant brings in a ceramic bowl containing a warm, dark red liquid bubbling slightly. The blood of a bull or rabbit, freshly drawn from the kitchens, still holding the fading warmth of life. This liquid was smeared directly across the cheeks, forehead, and bridge of the nose using a soft cloth, or sometimes just bare fingertips. The moment it touched the skin, a heavy metallic stench of raw iron flared up, assaulting the nasal cavity like a wall of thick air. Exposed to the cold air, the blood quickly coagulated, turning into a sticky film that sealed the skin's surface. The face was pulled taut, and the woman was forced to hold her posture for hours as this biological mask dried, shrank, and cracked into tiny fissures with even the slightest facial movement. Folk healers believed that fresh blood carried a primal life force, capable of neutralizing dark pigments and fading freckles, restoring a flawless, uniform complexion. But in reality, absolutely no biological mechanism supported that assumption. What actually happened was the skin was suffocated in an environment rich with decomposing proteins, highly prone to irritation and bacterial infection, while the user had to endure the sickening stench clinging to their skin for hours, like the lingering echo of a slaughterhouse. Applying fresh blood to the face was, at least, only a surface-level intervention, lacking immediate damage to the body's structure. Oh, but as aesthetic standards were pushed further, the methods for removing flaws evolved from mere concealment to direct chemical warfare, where the skin was subjected to controlled burning to obliterate every single hair on a living body. Number 3. Quicklime and arsenic. Incinerating hair follicles with chemicals. In many European courts, a completely hairless body was not just an aesthetic choice, but a marker of status. Razors of the time were considered primitive solutions, ineffective and prone to leaving rough stubble. To achieve a more absolute level of eradication, apothecaries developed a highly corrosive mixture, a depilatory cream made from quicklime and arsenic. Quicklime is an alkaline substance that generates intense heat when exposed to water. Arsenic, extracted from orpiment ore, it is a heavy metal compound with severe toxicity. When mixed into a paste, these two ingredients created a concoction that was both brutally corrosive and deeply toxic. The process began by slathering the thick gray paste onto the legs, arms, or facial hairlines. Almost instantly, the chemical reaction triggered. Natural moisture on the skin activated the quicklime, creating a searing burning sensation, bubbling slightly, and emitting the foul odor of denaturing proteins. The heat combined with strong alkalinity destroyed the keratin structure, causing the hair to shrivel and fall out. However, the chemicals did not distinguish between hair follicles and skin tissue. It attacked the entire contact area. The user had to endure the burning pain for a short duration, even while the servant performing the task had to monitor the timing perfectly. Just a few dozen seconds too long, and the paste would begin inflicting deep chemical burns into the epidermis. When wiped away with a damp cloth, the hair was gone, but it often took the top layer of skin right off with it. The treated areas could easily fall into a state of chemical burn, red, swollen, and weeping fluids. The greater danger lay in the open wounds, where the toxicity of the arsenic could seep directly into the body over time through repeated exposure. Using industrial-grade chemicals to purify the body demonstrated a drastic level of intervention for aesthetic standards. Yet, the beauty benchmarks of this era did not stop at the skin's surface. As aesthetic demands were pushed even further, the body was subjected to more direct internal interventions, shifting from external assaults to procedures that drained the internal systems. Number 2. Bloodletting for a pale complexion. Beauty by self-poisoning. From the 13th to the 16th century in England, France, and Italy, pale skin was not just an aesthetic standard. It was a blaring marker of social stratification. A complexion devoid of pink meant the owner did not perform outdoor labor and did not belong to the class whose bodies were branded by the sun and wind. But not everyone naturally possessed such an ideally frail constitution. When lead powder and makeup layers weren't enough to project a whiteness from within, some noble women went a step further. They actively drained the blood from their own bodies. This was not a medical treatment, and this was a form of aesthetic intervention, legitimized by societal beliefs. They hired barber surgeons, men who performed both medical procedures and bodily grooming at the time. The tools were crude metal lancets, often used across multiple patients, with absolutely no concept of sterilization. The target area was usually a vein in the crook of the arm, or sometimes the neck, if a stronger effect was desired. The procedure was highly mechanical. A cloth tourniquet was tightened around the bicep to make the vein bulge. The metal blade made a small incision, and dark red blood began to flow, dripping into a bronze basin waiting below. The woman sat perfectly still, watching her own life force exit her body. As blood volume dropped, blood pressure plummeted, and the heart had to beat furiously to compensate for the lack of oxygen. And in a very short time, the skin's pigmentation changed drastically. Lips lost their color, eyes sank, and cheeks turned a cold, ghostly blue-white. The physical effects were almost instantaneous. Dizziness, violent shivering, and fainting became regular occurrences. Yet, within the social context of the time, this severe state of exhaustion was romanticized as aristocratic fragility. However, the human body cannot be maintained in a state of chronic anemia without paying a heavy price. The cardiovascular system gradually failed, and oxygen-starved internal organs began to degenerate. Even more dangerously, with crude tools and unsanitary environments, bacteria could enter the bloodstream directly, leading to severe sepsis. Numerous medical records show that exhaustion and death directly linked to this habit were not uncommon. Draining one's own life force to achieve a standard hard-point skin tone was a form of slow erosion, where beauty was purchased with life itself. But at another extreme of aesthetics, there were those who chose not to weaken their bodies, but to challenge time by funneling heavy metals directly into their internal organs every single day. Number 1. Drinking liquid gold to preserve youth. In the 16th century French court, the name Diane de Poitiers stood out as a bizarre anomaly in royal history. As the powerful mistress of King Henri II, she was noted not just for her political influence, but for a striking physical appearance. At the age of 60, she still maintained remarkably smooth skin and a youthful aura that defied the life expectancy standards of the era, causing endless gossip in contemporary records. And among the popular rumors of the time, she was believed to be consuming a form of the elixir of life, a solution containing dissolved gold prepared by alchemists. According to the medical and pharmaceutical thinking of the era, gold was considered an imperishable metal that neither rusted nor decayed. Thus, a belief arose that ingesting it could impart its indestructible properties onto the human body. Imagine Diane de Poitiers in her private chambers, morning light streaming through the windows. She raises a delicate white porcelain cup filled with a shimmering metallic liquid. According to oral histories and indirect documentation, she likely consumed this solution as part of a strict daily routine spanning many years. From an outward perspective, her body did not display the extreme signs of aging typical of the nobility of her time. However, the human body possesses no mechanism to efficiently process heavy metals like dissolved gold. When gold compounds enter the digestive system, they are not fully broken down or rapidly expelled. Instead, they are retained and embedded deep within the body's tissues. Modern analysis, particularly from archaeological data, has confirmed that traces of this metal were found in her biological samples, including her hair and bones. In 2009, French scientists exhumed and analyzed the remains of Diane de Poitiers. The results revealed that the concentration of gold in certain tissue samples was astronomically higher than the average in modern humans, hundreds of times higher, according to comparative measurements. Based on this data, as researchers hypothesized that the long-term accumulation of this metal severely impacted her overall health, particularly her bone structure. Analyses indicated that her bones were notably more brittle than normal, while the exact cause of death remains inconclusive and is likely linked to multiple health factors. The massive gold poisoning played an undeniable role. Diane de Poitiers passed away at the age of 66. Her case is frequently cited as the ultimate example of aesthetic practices driven by Renaissance medical hypotheses, an era where the boundaries between belief, alchemy, and the limits of the human body were dangerously blurred. Looking back at all these practices, from chemicals burning the skin to poisons absorbed into the eyes, or to heavy metals accumulating in the organs, we see one terrifying commonality. Beauty was not merely pursued, it was bartered for the very physical integrity of the living body. Sometimes, humans did not perish from disease or war. Sometimes, they perished simply because their obsession with perfection was so absolute. They refused to accept the natural body they were born with. And the remaining question no longer lies in history, but with you. Of all these broken limits, which one makes you feel that humanity went the furthest past the point of no return? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our next descent into the dark truths of the past. Looking back at all these practices, from chemicals burning the skin, to poisons absorbed into the eyes, unto heavy metals accumulating in the organs, we see one terrifying commonality. Beauty was not merely pursued, it was bartered for the very physical integrity of the living body. Sometimes, humans did not perish from disease or war. Sometimes, they perished simply because their obsession with perfection was so absolute. They refused to accept the natural body they were born with. And the remaining question no longer lies in history, but with you. Of all these broken limits, which one makes you feel that humanity went the furthest past the point of no return? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our next descent into the dark truths of the past.